Films as The Terminator, Aliens, and Rambo 2. His new film, as we have already heard and learned, is called The Abyss. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to James Cameron. What was the budget on the first film you directed?
First film I directed, which I got fired off of, was called Piranha 2. And I think it was about 600,000. And then the second film was The Terminator, and that was 6 million. And the next film after that was Aliens, and that was 17 million, and this one was 43. So the next film on that curve would be about 150 million.
Yikes.
I mean, if someone had tapped me on the shoulder when I was 16 or 17 years old back in Canada and said, you know, you're gonna go to Hollywood and you're gonna be a big film director and you're gonna work with the top stars in the world, I would have said they were out of their minds. But, you know, that's part of what the adventure of life is all about. It takes you places you didn't expect. I grew up on a steady diet of science fiction. In high school, I took a bus to school an hour each way every day, and I was always absorbed in a book, science fiction book, which took my mind to other worlds and satisfied this, in a narrative form, this insatiable sense of curiosity that I had. There were several light bulbs at several different times, and the first one was when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey for the first time. And the light bulb there was, you know, a movie can be more than just telling a story. It can be a piece of art. It can be something that has a profound impact on your imagination, on your appreciation of how music works with the images and so on. It sort of just blew the doors off the whole thing for me, and at the age of 14, and I started thinking about film in a completely different way and got fascinated by it.
How did you start? What was your first position in film? What did you do?
I started working in special effects, and I did a little art direction, and then I worked, you know, I kind of got into second unit.
You worked with Roger Corman at one point?
Roger Corman, yeah.
Yeah, and was that a film you remember? You worked on a film?
Yeah, I worked on Battle Beyond the Stars and another film called Galaxy of Terror. Whenever I wasn't in school, I was out in the woods hiking and taking samples, frogs and snakes and bugs and pond water, and bringing it back, looking at it under the microscope. I was a real science geek, but it was all about trying to understand the world, understand the limits of possibility. My very first job as a director, it was like, okay, today I am a director, second unit director, and they needed a cutaway to a dismembered arm lying on the ground with worms crawling around on it. So, I have the arm, I have the worms, we have set up the camera, it's lit, and nothing happens. Yeah. It's just like a still photo. I took a piece of zip cord, you know, electrical cord, and put it underneath the arm and buried it so you couldn't see it. Right. And there's a guy behind the set. When I say action, he plugs in the electrical cord. Right.
So you're going to shoot electricity into the arm, right, the worms, both.
Yeah, right, exactly. And what I didn't know was that these two producers who were looking for a director for Piranha 2 had come in behind me. They're sizing me up, like maybe I can direct this low-budget horror film. Right. I go, okay, roll camera, all right. And action, and the electrician behind plugged in. The worms all started to move. I said, that's good, that's a cut. I look up, and there's these two guys looking at each other with amazement. I turned to them and say, come with us, we'd like to talk to you about a film we're making.
Sleek, fierce, savage, deadly, the Piranha.
Arnold Schwarzenegger playing a futuristic killing machine in The Terminator, which has been the #1 box office hit in the country lately, catching much of the movie industry very much by surprise.
So I was in Rome, and I was sick. I don't know what with some flu-like virus, and had a bit of a fever, and just had a dream. And it was an image that you know, that I remembered when I woke up, an image of a kind of chrome skeleton emerging from a fire.
This is a surprising movie. It's violent, it's bloody, it's sadistic, but it is also well acted and directed. It is R-rated. Don't go unless you like strong action pictures, but I must say, I did like it.
And I always believe that dreams aren't just the image. There's also a kind of narrative metadata that runs with it, an image, where in the dream you know what the image means. In my dream, I knew that all of its outer covering had been burned away by the fire, revealing it as a chrome, what we later termed the endoskeleton.
So here I am as this, ridiculous fanboy turned director, now wanting to do the sequel to, Ridley Scott's, much vaunted Alien film, and everybody tried to talk me out of it. They said, well, don't do that, because, anything that's good in your movie will be attributed to Ridley, and anything that's bad will be attributed to you. It's a no-win scenario. And I said, but I really want to do it. It'll be cool.
It's a raw and primal world. Windswept, not a place you'd want to live. Cold, freezing rain, that sort of thing. I wanted to do two things. I wanted to say this is definitely unlike anything that exists on Earth, but with points of familiarity, mountains, clouds, rain, that sort of thing. And using that, create a sensation, not of something that's absolutely inhuman and bizarre, but just of a place that's very, very difficult to survive in. The idea that the colonists that live there are like pioneers in a very unforgiving climate.
This is Jim's latest design for the face segger mechanics, and I want to show you and see if I understand what's going on here.
Once again, I went more for motion as opposed to design. We kept the design more or less the same as what H.R. Giger designed for the one Alien that they had in Alien, the full-sized adult version, of which we had many. We spent most of our R&D time on motion.
And I knew I could do action. I knew I could do white-knuckle action, that I could turn the screw tighter and tighter in an action sequence. So I figured, all right, let's do that. Let's jump off from the horror premise into what ultimately becomes an action film.
Get away from her, you bitch!
I grew up reading science fiction, and when I was in high school, I wrote a short story called The Abyss, and it was kind of the nucleus of this movie.
Flatbed, you online?
10-4, Lindsay, we read you loud and clear.
I think there are mysteries out there. I mean, the universe is filled with mysteries, and we're going to be exploring those mysteries for the next million years or whatever, because human beings we're curious monkeys, we're curious hominins, and we have to know what's over the hill. Some people have it stronger than others. It's one thing to fantasize about going into the deep ocean, and I certainly did that when I was a kid, and I learned to scuba dive when I was 16, but it wasn't until I made the movie The Abyss that we started to actually build hardware to shoot underwater.
The helmet sort of brought us into the 20th century in that I could speak to everyone. Of course, they couldn't speak back to me, so this was a director's dream come true.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, and our first film is Terminator 2, and thanks to some truly spectacular and mystifying special effects, as well as some surprisingly solid acting, this is one terrific action picture. I enjoyed it a lot more than the original.
The second Terminator film, it was 6 years later when I wrote the script, 7 years later. And a lot of things had changed for me. I'd done much bigger stuff. We knew we could afford more. I didn't set out to make a $100 million movie. I set out to make a movie. I thought it would be maybe $50 million or something like that. I went back to an idea that I had had for the original Terminator, which is of the liquid metal robot from the future as well. They're kind of their most advanced being. They send the guy back that scares them. So much had to be learned about refractive ray tracing and surface reflections and how you animate and how you take the facial data from the actors, which was done by laser scan, and how you animate with that, and how much of it is keyframe animation and how much of it we actually had the actors do themselves. So it was quite a bit.
The planets lined up for that movie. Yeah. Arnold, where he was in his career as this kind of global superstar, and me having done enough difficult stuff in the meantime to be able to deal with that kind of movie.
Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss. My God,
tough
it's
pictures,
the ramp. Oh, God, yes.
They all prepared me to do Terminator 2.
Around the world, Arnold's greatest hit, Terminator 2, earned almost $500 million. And True Lies is another high-stakes Hollywood gamble. Arnold and T2 director James Cameron are together again in a production that reportedly cost $100 million plus.
Filmmaker James Cameron has a reputation for running over budget and out of time. He also has a reputation for making visually stimulating and profitable movies loaded with action and special effects.
We started in Los Angeles, then we went to Washington, D.C., then from there we went to Miami. From Miami we went out to Key West and various places in the Florida Keys, and when we were done blowing all that up, we came back to Los Angeles for a while. Then we went to Rhode Island, and we came back to Los Angeles, and then we went up to the Colorado Rockies to shoot a snow sequence. And then we came back to Los Angeles. We always, return home when we're done sort of destroying other states in the Union.
Among them are Aliens, True Lies, The Terminator, and Terminator 2. His latest is Titanic.
And when you went to everyone and said, I want to make a film about Titanic,
You can imagine they were ecstatic.
It was $100 million over its $100 million budget.
so what'd they think? Like originally the budget was going to be what, 100 million or something?
Yeah, we told them 120, and that's what we thought it was going to cost. And I
Yeah,
went,
you weren't lying to them. You
No,
just
no.
figured that's it.
But it is also being recognized as one of the best movies of the year.
Through all the publicity and all the delays and all the reports about its world record budget, turns out to be a glorious Hollywood epic, wonderfully well crafted and well worth the wait. The film begins with eerie actual footage of the real Titanic in its watery grave 2.5 miles below the sea.
I said, we're going to dive to the wreck, we're going to film it for real, we'll be using it in the opening of the film. It'll be really important, it'll be a great marketing hook, and I talked them into funding an expedition.
The New Yorker's Anthony Lane wrote, "The film is grand and wrenching. If you are going to spend $200 million on a movie, this is the way to do it."
6 months later, I found myself in a Russian submersible 2.5 miles down in the North Atlantic, looking at the real Titanic through a viewport. Not a movie, not HD, for real.
All the publicity on this movie almost sank it before it got out of port.
Yeah.
It's really a good movie.
Yeah.
You know, this drumbeat of controversy that's coming out about the film.
It's nothing new for me, though. I mean, the last 3 films that I've made have all been said to be the most expensive movie ever made, so it's sort of like, you know what, films cost more now.
More than a decade ago, James Cameron became king of the world after Titanic won 11 Oscars and made $1.8 billion at the box office. Now he's back with a highly anticipated 3D blockbuster, Avatar.
Well, I'd say the very first seed of Avatar was a dream I had when I was in college. I was 19, and I had a dream about an amazing forest that was bioluminescent. And I got up afterwards. I was so inspired by the dream, I started sketching it in oil pastel, colored pencils, and so on. And years later, I started to incorporate that concept into a story. It wasn't Avatar, it was another story.
So this is going back to 1976, I think. And this was for a film project that never went anywhere. But the thing that's interesting about it is that I've already got a tall, hot blue girl in that movie. Her name wasn't Neytiri, and it was in a completely different context, but I was already thinking about it then.
Why do you think it is doing so well beyond the technology, beyond the 3D?
Yeah, I think, well, we didn't see this coming. We expected that we were making a commercial film. It had action, it had this whole other world. We kind of knew what worked about the movie. And I think it's actually the sum total of all the elements. There's no one thing. It's not just the 3D, not just the visual effects. I think it's driven a lot by the fact that people are having a strong emotional reaction in the film. I finally wanted to make a movie where I could use all these visual ideas that I'd had percolating for years. But I also wanted to tell a story that was about, where we're going as a human species. What our relationship with nature is. I've been a climate activist since high school. The film wouldn't have existed if I hadn't been, because the head of 20th Century Fox said, well, I like the story, it's a good script, can we get all this tree-hugging hippie bullshit out of it? And I said, actually no, because the reason I want to make the film is exactly because of the tree-hugging, hippie, hairy-legged, Birkenstocks-wearing, bullshit. And in Avatar, you never see planet Earth. It's completely off camera, but it's a presence in the back of our mind. And when Jake says that the Earth, he calls it the dying world. So what we're saying is 150 years from now, we haven't solved these problems yet. And so now we're going to continue with our same patterns. The biggest challenge was to make the characters are going to be done with computer-generated techniques, to make them feel real. Now, I don't know if we achieved photoreality, whatever that is, but I do think we've achieved character reality. I think when you watch the movie, Neytiri is a real person. Even though she's an alien, I think she's a real person. I think that the performance that Zoe Saldana gave to the movie is exactly preserved in her CG character. And that was our biggest challenge, and that's what took so long to do, because it hadn't been done before. We'd seen examples of performance capture that were intriguing visually, but there was something missing.
you know, from the face.
I have young filmmakers come up to me and say, you know, give me some advice for doing this. And I say, don't put limitations on yourself. Other people will do that for you. Don't do it to yourself. Don't bet against yourself. And take risks. NASA has this phrase that they like, failure is not an option. But failure has to be an option in art and in exploration, because it's a leap of faith. And no important endeavor that required innovation was done without risk. You have to be willing to take those risks. So that's the thought I would leave you with, is that in whatever you're doing, failure is an option, but fear is not. Thank you.